what I've tried to do is what's best for where I am. And I think a lot of coaches forget that. We consume a lot now, especially, and it's a great thing. When I first started coaching, it was hard to find information. It was hard to get examples from the best in terms of what they do. Now it's a piece of cake. But I think sometimes we're applying the wrong thing to our athletes because we're not thinking specifically about what they need. So, same thing with program planning. I try to look at, what's going to work for GW. And in all likelihood, it's not going to be what everybody else is doing, nor do I want it to be, because then we just kind of like are at the back of the pack trying to scratch and claw in an uphill battle anyway.
Boomers! Take your marks.
Welcome to another episode of the Get Out Swim podcast. I'm your host, Seamus T. Quinn, and today I'm joined by head coach of men's and women's swimming and diving at George Washington University. This is Coach Brian Thomas. So, Brian, thanks for hopping on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I had the opportunity to interview Coach Nick Askew recently at Howard University, and one name that came to mind based off recommendations was getting you on here. And like I said off air, I thought that was fitting personally, just because I was able to compete in the Atlantic 10 conference, the conference in which you coached GW in, and got to witness, the success that GW was having at those conference championships year in and year out. And, from an outside perspective, without knowing, the ins and outs of your program, I mean, it's exciting anytime you have, a program just achieve such a high level of excellence and certainly repeat championships. I mean, that says something about the program and certainly the leadership at the top. So from a selfish perspective, I'm very excited for this. So anyways, yeah. So let's start by the Atlantic 10 championships. I mean, that happened, a few weeks ago now, but your men were able to win their fourth Atlantic 10 title in a row, fourth consecutive championship, and your women won their third consecutive championship. And it was just a historic meet across the board for your men and women. I was looking at some highlights. I jotted down some notes, and you guys had 10 gold medal relays, the first Atlantic 10 team in history to win all 10 relays at the championships. Within those relays, you had 7 A10 records and 8 program records. Not to mention, for your diving squad, you guys had the highest combined diving score in the last 5 years. So not just on the swimming side, you guys are getting it done, but on the diving side too. So just talk to me about your thoughts of that meet and just how, again, historic and exciting it was for your men and women.
Yeah, I think I was a little surprised. We felt like we had performed pretty well the previous year. And we pay attention to what we're doing in terms of school records, conference records, all that sort of stuff. And we kind of thought the bar would be, we set maybe a little too high to match that. Maybe not too high, but we knew it'd be tough. So we're a little bit surprised. I think we ended with, right now we have 18 Atlantic 10 records this year. We have 29 new school records, which is just a boatload. I mean, the women set 17 out of 22 events in terms of school records. So, we were pretty happy with it. I don't really focus on that. Like, I don't go into a meet with a number in mind or anything like that. We just want to put the athletes in the best possible position to go fast and go fast at the right time and see what it means. And this year was really no different that way. I probably have the same nerves and the same uncertainties and things like that going into a meet that anyone would have. And we just try to, compete at a high level. We coach them up as best we can and kind of meet every athlete where they are and what they need and take it from there. And that's it. And the result was particularly good this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, was there anything special about this squad that you had going into this year where you could sense, like you said you were surprised, right? But was there a telling sign sort of from you and your other coaches here that was like, there's something special about the squad? Or is it just, kind of the year in and year out, just like amazing athletes that you're getting to work with, and it's really no different?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. It starts with our coaching staff. We have 2 new assistant coaches in Lauren Sullivan and Carol Schvetz, and Christopher Lane has been with me for 3 years now on the diving side. we work really well together. I mean, the way we can complement each other, the way that we, communicate at a really high level and really comfortably, I think has made a huge difference here. And that's what I point to first and foremost. And I think the second thing is our senior leadership has been excellent. Seniors and fifth years, really kind of took the torch in terms of making sure there wasn't like complacency with a conference championship and things of that nature. And even to the degree where one of our captains came to me, during the meet where we were, at that point doing pretty well and said, earlier this week, I was worried we weren't going to win and maybe even be competitive in winning. And it was kind of a, we laughed a bit. Of course, going in, we knew we had a good shot, but it meant that the message had been received and like the team had bought into what we had talked about all year long and making sure that there wasn't complacency. And we do, set goals that are appropriate for the team and achievable, but also, within the Atlantic 10 and outside the Atlantic 10. And I think that helps us, achieve what we want to within the conference.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love the mentioning just kind of the fusion of the coaches and that leadership having from the top and then going down to your captains and just how important that is, culturally for your team. Absolutely. What were some memorable races, if any? I mean, I know across the board there were just a plethora, so it'd be hard to leave, any out or feel like you are, but were there any like moments within that meet that you just were like left, like, just surprised, like your mouth dropped, you're like, oh my, like, this is just not what I expected? Were there any like moments like specifically?
Yeah, like in these 4-day meets, you look for some signs early on in terms of how things are going or how you might perform. And I thought starting with the relays on Wednesday night, our women going to 7:10 in that 800 freestyle relay, we had performed really well in that last year. We had broken the conference record by maybe 3 seconds, school record by like 6. And, to tack on to that was like, all right, we're looking pretty good. And I thought that was somewhat of a sign in terms of what was going to come. On the women's side, I think of Ava Topolewski's mile and her 500. The 500 was one of the best races I've ever seen. Zoe Schneider, a freshman, ended up winning it for us at 4:44, but her and Ava were neck and neck the whole way. Phoebe Wright, a sophomore for us, was kind of in the mix as well, coming in third. And it was just a battle. Like you could feel the energy throughout the pool. And I think everybody, including the other teams, just felt the sort of intensity that was coming off of that sort of battle. And it was just awesome to watch that like unfold. And I actually think it may have taken a little bit out of them, for the remainder of the meet with how intense it was. It didn't take a lot out of Ava Topolewski. She won the mile by a mile in 16:08, I think dropped 20 seconds. That's a time that'll get her into the NCAA championship. Ava DeAngelis going 59.7 in the 100 breaststroke will hopefully, I think at this point, get her into the women's meet. Tony and Djurdje in the 200 freestyle, 133.2, a conference record. And one of the most epic 200 freestyles you're ever going to see. Him and Dylan Felt from Davidson had a great battle. And I think that's what I'll probably remember most is that the conference itself is improving. Conference is definitely improving. And I know you coming from UMass probably, pay some attention to this. You kind of have to be at your best at the Atlantic 10 meet to score now. And I love that. I think that's a great thing. Just for the conference as a whole. And I expect us at the women's meet to have more than just GW represented. Fordham looks to be in there with their breaststroker on the women's side. So I think that's a positive step forward. In previous years, the conference will typically have one, maybe two qualifiers to the NCAA championship. And right now we're lined up to have 4, I think. So good steps forward all around. And that's probably what I'll take more than anything, aside from some of the great results that we had. It was tough for me. I mean, we did have some of those nights, like I think Friday night, especially the men's 400 medley relay finished it. They went 3:05, which is just like at the time, like top 15 in the country. So it like kind of made me forget about some of the other things that had happened that night. And like, I had to go back every night. I go back, I look at everybody's result and kind of check in from there. Zoe Schneider's another good example. Ava goes 16:08 in the mile. Zoe went 16:20, which would have broken our school in conference record and was just like a great, borderline elite swim for her. And, you want to make sure those things don't get lost when you have some great swims at the top. But yeah, it was definitely memorable the whole week.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, I was following along the results closely, talking to some of my teammates. Obviously, we were proud of how our UMass team did there, both on our men's and women's side. But you can't look past just, the kind of upper echelon of these races, especially coming from a lot of your swimmers. And certainly the 3:05 4 medley, I was blown away. I saw 3:05 and I was like, that is quick. And certainly, getting more representation from, mid-majors at these NCAA meets, I think is really exciting. Like you said, typically it's only maybe one swimmer or two swimmers, but to have a squad there, I think that's really exciting. So excited for what lies ahead for you guys there. Will a relay make NCAAs will that 4 medley qualify for NCAAs, or will they just be outside that reach?
Probably just outside. So we got back from
Okay.
Djurdje last night about midnight, last chance meet, and the guys
Right.
actually improved their time a bit, went 3:05.6, which I was really proud of. I mean, in that circumstance, at a last chance meet, you kind of take away all the emotional piece, right? That usually goes into a conference championship. So I was thrilled with how we performed, but we ended up maybe 0.6 short of the A cut. We need to get an A cut. We only have one qualifier on the men's side for the NC2A meet right now. So unless we had 4 qualifiers, a B cut doesn't get it done. You need to have an individual qualifier and an A cut to be able to get that relay in. And of course, maybe it wasn't even a goal for us going into the meet, not something we had really thought about. We had to drop 4 seconds off of our school record to get there. But once we, achieved it the first time and going into Djurdje last weekend, you start dreaming, right? And you want that to happen. So it's not that it was disappointing, because it wasn't. But at the same time, it would have been really cool to have, 4 to 6 guys on the pool deck at the NCAA championship. So we're going to keep taking cracks at it, man. We've been close a couple of times, and that's definitely one of those goals that stuck out to me.
Definitely. Yeah. And so you guys just came from that Djurdje meet. Were there any other exciting swims that you were able to have there from some of your swimmers just at that last chance meet?
Yeah, Djurdje Matic improved his seed time in the 100 fly. We're confident he's in. I think he's 21st in the country at the moment, but he went 45-1, I think 45-1-0. He also split 44-3 on our relay last night, which is like lightning quick for a 100 fly. Split 19-7 on the 200 med, which is, again, that was one of those swims that everybody in the pool just kind of went like, whoa, you can kind of hear it. So he's swimming at a really high level right now, which is exciting going into an NC2A meet. Mariah Freitas went a best time in a school record in the 100 fly, which was a little unexpected. Other than that, I mean, those last chance meets are tough, man. We've had some good fortune with them in the past. Last year, we got a qualifier from Djurdje. The year before, same thing, but they're pretty benign atmospheres. It's a little bit dead. And in a place like UGA, you get a lot of maybe non-scoring swimmers from the SEC or the ACC. So it's their primary meet, or you get, the rest of us that are just trying to squeak into the NCAA meet, and then almost no one in the stands, a couple parents. So it's funny. It's a lot of pretty good swimming, a lot of teams that we've heard of, but a really quiet environment, which sometimes works great. Sometimes when you take away a little bit of that anxiety piece, you can execute a race a little bit better. But I think we're just a little tired, and we're a little short on a couple of places too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you put it this way, it's just kind of like sprinkles on top to be able to capitalize on a last chance meet 2 weeks removed from, or a week removed from, conferences. It's it is hard, especially with the atmosphere. It's just different. But yeah, that's great. I mean, to come out with some impressive swim still is exciting for you. So any kind of Olympic trial, or talk to me about, just because it is the Olympic year, and that's just generated additional excitement for our sport of swimming, and certainly loving seeing the fast times that are being produced in preparation for that. Talk to me about your squad and sort of how they will kind of keep their eye on Olympic hopefuls. That could be, I know you have a lot of international swimmers too on your team. So what does that landscape look like for your team?
Yeah, I think the strongest Olympic hopeful we have is probably Djurdje. He's from Serbia, has been on the Serbian national team for a number of years. 2 summers ago, went to the European Championship, which was kind of his first major international meet, and good experience for me too, being able to kind of operate in that environment. Probably more than anything, I've become pretty close with his coach back home, and that's great. To have a good, clean transition, if he's going home for a stretch, all that sort of stuff, tends to work well. He actually, went to Doha for the World Championship and came back and met us in Hampton for the Atlantic 10 meet, and we weren't quite sure, of course, how that was going to go. I mean, he swam great at the World Championship. We didn't really adjust his rest for the A10 meet too much. He went over to Doha. I kept sending him workouts and kept his his rest plan going. He even lifted over there. He lifted the day he got back from Doha to Hampton in our hotel, and just tried to keep him on plan. So he had a great split on Serbia's relay at the World Championship, went 51.8, I think, for 100 fly long course, which is a great time for right now, his best split easily. And then came back, swam, lightning quick both last week and this past week. So we're feeling really good with where we're at right now. He'll probably get a couple of tune-up meets long course after the NCAA championship, and then go home to the European championship in June and try to qualify. He needs a FINA A cut to be able to do that, which I think is 51.6 in the 100 fly. So he's probably our best shot at the moment. We do have, of course, trials qualifiers in the US, and I'm hoping for more. We feel like we have a bunch that are like knocking on the door. But that's always a great meet. It's a fun meet, new atmosphere this year being in Indy, versus Omaha. So looking forward to that as well. So yeah, we'll kind of transition right into it. We have a number of athletes that took a week off last week after A10s, and they're getting back in the water this week. And that's probably been the biggest area of growth for our program. Honestly, the last 3 years, especially. I've been here 6, but especially the last 3 years, we've started to like snowball athletes that they just really care about their swimming and diving. So they're in it. If anything, I'm trying to get them out of the water for a little while and convince them like, hey, resting and having some time away is part of the training process. So like, let's make sure we do that. So we are excited for a big summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back, I had a question that popped up. It was based off of you talking about just your women kind of battling it out in those distance events, and then also just kind of like what I would assume is your men and women feeding off of each other's successes and just being more of that collective we as opposed to the I, kind of my success as opposed to the team success. So like, talk to me about just that in terms of, you guys are a combined program, correct? So are you practicing together? What do the dynamics look like in practice that maybe helps kind of feed that just camaraderie within the team and, building off of each other's success? Because clearly, that has to be kind of done outside of that competition realm, I would assume. So yeah, talk to me about maybe just how that team practices, how they approach, and how the men and women sort of can fuse together.
Yeah, we're definitely like a truly combined program, and something that we take pride in. It's why I took the job here is to be able to coach both men and women, and I think they thrive in that. I have, I guess, been proud of the way that both teams have grown and kind of like moved up national rankings together and things like that. They're like almost right in line with each other, which I think is good. It's healthy for the team. From a training standpoint, I think it has definitely helped elevate both sides, but especially the women. Like, we have 2 to 3, maybe 4 women that just like straight up beat their training partners on the men's side in workout every day. Like Ava Topolewski, she beat some guys in the individual event at the Atlantic 10 meet. Like a lot of them, maybe like 10. So that's been really good, I think, in terms of getting the best out of the training environment for them. And the way we run it is maybe a little untraditional. We don't have the typical, sprint mid distance groups. We typically have like 6 or 7 different groups going for each main workout, and we want to plug you into what you need, and make sure that every workout you have is pretty specific to what you're trying to achieve. So, we might end up with a couple of breaststrokers that go a similar time. However, they train 2 completely different ways to get there. And our goal throughout the 4 years that they're here is to kind of like find the ideal way for them to train, and also create some flexibility for how we do it. Misha Lebowski is a good example. He yesterday at the ECAC meet in Annapolis, Maryland, set our school record in the mile. Went a 15.00 in the mile. He went 15.22 at the A10 meet, and then a week later drops 22 seconds. So like, that doesn't mean that we got it all right, of course, because we wanted him to go fast in Hampton, but he trains a unique way to get there. He trains primarily IM. It's a change we made for him in like November, and it came from communication with the athlete. It wasn't like us cracking the whip telling him what to do. He came in and he said, something's just not quite right with what I'm doing. Can I try this? And it's like, yeah, why not, man? Like, let's give it a shot. And if you believe in it, it's good. It's good, variable training for him. He swims the 4 IM, so it made sense. He went 3:47, but I also think it's what he needed to be able to finish a mile like he did yesterday. And that's completely different than the way that Ava Topolewski trains for it, going 16:08. our goal is to find what's right for each kid and, build that into our system. And it means a little bit of variance and variability in terms of who's around you every day and who's in your groups. And I think that's good. I think it's good to have a little bit of variety that way. At least, as long as they're elevating each other and like picking each other up when needed and elevating their training and the ability to train at a high level and things of that nature. And I think they do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I feel like it's been a constant thread through some of these podcasts as coaches, when just kind of talking about their maybe training approach. It's like we do our best to individualize things to the sense where it's like we want to give that specific athlete what they need. Often it's, harder depending on the resources available to you, pool space, coaches, whatever you got going on. It's not always fully possible, but that's really cool to hear that, you guys do your best to try to manage, what each person needs and kind of communicate that between coach and athlete. But I'm curious, like, talk to me more about maybe the process in which you guys go about sort of delegating certain practices, whether that be between, the coaches on the coaching staff or, just coming together and maybe talking through, okay, what does this person need? What does that person need? What does a training block want to look like heading into this meet? Like, what is sort of the process like for you and the coaches when, kind of looking at what do we need? What do we need to kind of give our athletes here?
Yeah. We definitely have kind of like a loose way of looking at it in terms of how coaching responsibilities are split up. Carlo handles the longer side of things, which includes, of course, the distance events, the 400 IM as well. Lauren will handle the short side of things, and we kind of team up on that a lot of times as well. And, there are times where there's mornings where Lauren has a group of breaststrokers, and in the afternoons I have that group. And like, we tend to mix it up a little bit that way and trying to make sure that the kids are benefiting from all of our strengths. Carlo brings certain strengths, Lauren brings certain strengths, I bring certain strengths, and we want them to benefit from all of that. And, I think that's been a benefit to the kids. But we do have kind of like a loose way of, at least having some organization that way. But for example, on a given day, we do run 3 main workouts back to back to back. So a 12:30 group, which is mostly those that would have a class conflict, and then a 2:15 and a 4:15. And within each group, I'll probably have, 2:15, maybe like 3, sometimes 4 different sets going on at one time. And for that workout, I might write it for everybody, but Carlo and Lauren are on the pool deck with me, helping administer all of those groups. Same thing at 4:15, where they kind of take the reins. On a Monday afternoon, Carlo has a group of 1650 swimmers. It's kind of specific, high aerobic work. Lauren has a group of 200 freestylers, and she handles that group, and I just help them administer it. Sometimes we bring both of those groups together and do a workout that's going to benefit our 800 freestyle relay. And I think that's why both relays were on point this year, is because we had a specific focus for that. So we tend to get a little creative with it that way. The hardest part is that it means a ton of hours on the pool deck. Like, we're on pool deck, anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day. So it takes a strong commitment. And I do have to find the right balance that way, between individualizing what we need, but at the same time, having 8 workouts and 8 lanes with 8 people doing their own thing probably isn't what's best for them. Like, having a good group dynamic matters. So we try to, balance all of that pretty well.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, to be honest, I could, get into the weeds about your training with you probably for, the better part of a couple hours here. But I would say I want to kind of take a step back here, as I often do when getting to know coaches. But I just want to know, like, tell me about your background, like in the sport of swimming, how you got introduced to the sport of swimming, ultimately how you got into coaching after your time, as a competitive swimmer, and maybe who were, some of those early mentors for you along the way.
Yeah, man, it's a loaded question. I think, like a lot of coaches, I was a mediocre swimmer. And I started out as a young guy. My older brother swam, and I just got bored hanging out at swim meets, so I decided to jump on. I swam for a big club in New England, Burnell Skater Swim Club, and it was like very high intensity. I'm a child of the 90s, born in the 80s. So it's high volume, a lot of sessions per week. I swam my high school season, but I didn't stop swimming club workouts either. I'd do them back to back, and I just ate it up, man. I loved it. I loved the social component. I think it was a big confidence builder going through age group swimming, going through high school swimming, and just had a ton of fun with it. I think at the same time as I was doing that, without realizing it, I watched what my coaches did every day, and it just seemed like a blast. I had great relationships with my coaches, and I still do, and just really enjoyed that part of it. I was a lousy college swimmer, so like I think I came out of that and just like really committed to finding something I could sink my teeth into and try to become pretty good at. And that was it. It wasn't much more than that. I loved being on the pool deck, bit of a gym rat that way, and kind of ate it all up in terms of learning and internalizing a lot of what I could, and took it from there. I started out, I was a swimmer at the University of Connecticut. I started my coaching career there, ran a club there for 4 years, was an assistant coach at UConn for 2. And from there moved on to Western Kentucky University. And that was really formative for me, I think, in terms of my coaching. I worked under Bruce Marchanda, who was one of my mentors, and taught me a lot about just like the nuts and bolts of how to train at a high level and how to actually put together a training program based in physiology and how science of training works, and applying that to some pretty good swimmers. We had an Olympian from the United States, Claire Donahue, in 2012, had multiple NCAA All-Americans, and just a ton of fun, not only competing at that level and having exposure at that level, but especially with Claire on the national team for 5 years, just allowed me access to what's being done at the highest level. So I could learn from that. And I just tried to soak that up like as much as I could. And, from there, my first head coaching job was at St. Bonaventure. I had 1 year as an assistant at UNLV. It was only 9 months, but it was awesome. Like, it taught me so much about what can be achieved in a really short period of time, mostly in terms of forming relationships. Like I heard from their staff on Saturday, talking back and forth about our different conference meets. I connect with, the athletes I coached there all the time. They're still in swimming, quite a few of them. And then from there, I moved on to St. Bonaventure, was there for 2 years as the head coach for the women, and have been here at GW for 6.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious as to kind of those early years, like when you're done with being a UConn swimmer, and kind of transitioning to, it seems like, coaching club and UConn in the starting years. And then it could even, then blend over to your time, Western Kentucky. Like, what were some experiences like early on for you that were just like learning lessons? I know you talked about kind of having the mentor that you had at Western Kentucky, and certainly learning more about the science and physiology backed behind what we're actually doing in the water and on land. But like, what were, I don't know, some moments that you had to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, this is maybe something different for me than I expected or anticipated?
Yeah, that's super important. Like, and especially if you have like young coaches that are going to tune into this podcast, the big thing for me was I would get way too frustrated, like way too soon. And I would just grind myself into the ground, expecting too much too soon, and had to learn to be a little bit more patient. And I think in doing so became like a better coach because of it. I think that's you're not going to learn that lesson until you go through it. The other thing that I would encourage young coaches, like, I think one thing I'm proud of is I have an atypical background for someone coaching, swimmers to an NCAA championship and things of that nature. I feel like I've really had to work for it, and I don't necessarily have the pedigree to get there with a phenomenal swimming career or whatever it might be. I've really worked my way up. The other piece of that is I've been really fortunate to have people that have backed me and given me the right opportunity at the right time and believed in me, even though I didn't necessarily have that pedigree. So look for those people. Another person for me that comes to mind is Jay Kraft. He's a coach in New England. He was an excellent swimmer at a national level when he was at Syracuse back in the 90s, and was my coach for my club growing up. And I just learned a tremendous amount from him, and still do. I go back and forth with him like all the time. That's more or less probably about the personal side versus the training side, although it's a little bit of the training side. But in any event, just kind of like trying to soak up all that I could at any given moment. I lived it, and it was probably easier before I had kids and like all of that. I've had to learn how to balance that better. But I would say, like, don't push that piece away. It was really formative. The other good thing I did, running my own club for 4 years right out of college was like trial by fire.
Oh,
like
yeah, I can
big time.
imagine. Yeah.
I had no clue what I was doing, but that's all right. Like we still elevated it. You know, we had success within our
Mm,
LSD. We had junior national qualifiers, which had never happened before, and all that sort of stuff. It was basically just through hard work and like having the right people in the right place at the right time. And that was a ton of fun. That was a ton of fun. It's funny how swimming works, right? You know, I would say, you know, winning a 400 medley relay at the A10 meet when I was at St. Bonaventure was just as gratifying as watching Claire Donahue make a U.S. Olympic team when I was at Western Kentucky. And it's about the work that you put into it,
mm,
the vision of success maybe that you've put in place, or whether or not you choose to share it. Like you might have a vision of what you want to do, and I think that's awesome and important to have. Yeah, when I think back to the start, which like is almost 20 years ago now, I just think about the grinder, man. Like my office was a closet at UConn when I was just running the club, and
mhm.
I made it a great closet. Like I tried to turn it into an awesome space that I could spend like all day and night, and you know, just try to soak up as much as I could. And I think that was a positive thing. It taught me the value of hard work, and I encourage young coaches to gravitate in that direction. Like find a place where you're going to have to do a lot. You know, if it's collegiate coaching, it's like you're going to have to work on team travel. You're going to have to work on meals. You're going to have to, you know, immerse yourself in the scholarship side or budgeting. Like find a place where you're going to do a little bit. You're going to be, you know, involved in the day-to-day coaching of more than just one group, or at least make sure you got a group or whatever it might be. You know, that formative piece is really important.
Yeah. No, I mean, great little nuggets in there. Just from the advice standpoint for younger coaches. One thing I liked is that you mentioned it's weird how, I mean, it's just interesting how swimming works where, you know, you could have at one level Claire Donahue making, you know, the highest level of achievement and making the Olympic team and being a national team member, but then, you know, sharing that same sort of feeling when, you know, St. Bonaventure wins that 4 medley when you're there as their head coach. And I was thinking about it in my own way. I was just at a club meet. I'm coaching, you know, younger kids now, about 11, 12 age group on a local club that we have here. And God, I was just so excited when they were making these district cuts and, you know, they're going 40 seconds in a 50 breaststroke or whatever it is. Like I'm sharing that same feeling that I did when I was, you know, at the college level for the last few years working with higher level college swimmers. It's interesting because I think, to your point, like the investment that you have built with that swimmer and just the shared experience of knowing how hard that you have both worked as a coach and as an athlete to get there. It doesn't matter what level it's at. It just is. It's a great feeling, and that's what we chase. So I love that. And so like you ended up in this kind of Division I space. You know, obviously at GW being in a mid-major Division I conference, kind of coaching in this sphere, but was that always the vision for you? Like, you know, you started off coaching club and obviously doing some assistant coaching with UConn too. But yeah, how did you kind of land in that? What was that vision like for you thinking, oh, I want to, you know, kind of go down this route? Because I know, you know, as a coach now, I'm thinking, well, you know, is Division III right? Is Division I? Is club swimming right? Because there's all these pros and cons on both sides, mostly pros as opposed to cons. But I would say, yeah, what was that like for you kind of going in that route that you went down?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think what I would say is remain open-minded. You know,
Mm,
don't limit yourself in terms of what you're doing. You may find something great in a place you didn't expect. My vision was to teach and to coach high school in like a club. That was it. That's what I had
mm,
seen my, you know, mentors do. And it just looked awesome to me. It's what spoke to me. Both of my parents were teachers. You know, my father was a coach. He coached gymnastics. He coached golf at the high school level for about 30 years. So that was my vision initially. And I started coaching the club in Connecticut. And a couple of years in, my collegiate coach asked me to come on board with the you know, with the team at UConn. And I actually hesitated at first, to be honest. I said, you know, coach, I love what I do with the club. And when do you need an answer? And he said, well, yesterday. So I went for it and never looked back. Like once I got into that age demographic, it spoke to me a lot. And like I said, I didn't have a good college career myself. And that's why I thought maybe at first I was hesitant, but once I got into it, I learned that kind of served me well. You know, I could relate with more people probably and more
right.
athletes, you know, on a different level who it's a struggle for. And sometimes with our elite kids, if they're being a pain in the butt to me, I remind them how easy it is for them compared to a lot of us. And it's like, that like prepared me quite well. So, I realized I was pretty competitive. I think, once I got a little more exposure to it, I stopped thinking like a mid-major. And like, I think what we try to put together here is what you can find, anywhere. And that's really what I want. So I think the competitive piece kind of took over for me, and I wanted to try to do it as high level as possible.
Yeah, no, definitely. I like the open-mindedness piece. I try to keep that in the back of my mind as a young coach here for sure. But certainly, like at its core, just I think, yeah, coaches are educators, and so no matter what level you end up going down, I think they're all important. And so I think it's good to keep that in mind too. Well, from an outside perspective, like I kind of mentioned to this, or I kind of sent you this question earlier just because I thought it was interesting, but like I see you as having sort of this reputation of coming into a new program and sort of just raising the level of performance. I mean, you did this in your short time with St. Bonaventure, and certainly now in these last 6 seasons at GW. I just want to know like what you attribute this to. Obviously, the humble piece is probably there where it's like, I don't know, but I would say like, I definitely find that interesting. People who are able to elevate that level of performance coming into certain programs is fascinating to me. So yeah. So if you can answer that, how do you attribute that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess first and foremost, I don't know if I have a reputation or if I'm good enough to have a reputation yet. Maybe that's a goal. Yeah, I think that what I've tried to do is what's best for where I am. And I think a lot of coaches forget that. We consume a lot now, especially, and it's a great thing. When I first started coaching, it was hard to find information. It was hard to get examples from the best in terms of what they do. Now it's a piece of cake, but I think sometimes we're applying the wrong thing to our athletes because we're not thinking specifically about what they need. So, same thing with program planning. I try to look at, what's going to work for GW. And in all likelihood, it's not going to be what everybody else is doing, nor do I want it to be, because then we just kind of like are at the back of the pack trying to scratch and claw in an uphill battle anyway. As you can probably imagine in the recruiting space, we lose a lot of athletes to Power Fives and things of that nature. And sometimes it does feel like we're swimming upstream that way. But at the same time, we'll land a kid that we develop in a year or two later. Even Topolowski would be at like the top of the SEC or the Pac-12 intermile and things of that nature. So I try to just do what's best for the environment I'm in, for the institution, and what fits our school the best. I don't want an athlete at GW who's not going to be focused academically, because it's a great academic university, and we need athletes that are kind of competitive on both sides. So I've tried to look at that first and foremost. We're deliberate, of course, in the recruiting realm. That's where it starts, and making sure that we have a good message to share. 9 times out of 10, every kid I call has never really heard of GW. So I'm starting there, and I need to paint a picture of what we have to offer, and just like take our time and take those steps until they can only see themselves here, which is a lot of work. So that's really where it starts. And then, I think from there, once you start to get the right people here, it can snowball a bit. And Tony Djurdje is a good example. He was a swimmer at St. Francis Brooklyn. That team was eliminated last year in May, and Djurdje, who's our guy from Serbia, is connected with him. He told him, like, Brian's going to reach out to you, and we took it from there. And he's a 136 in his 2 free at St. Francis, went 133 for us. So like, there's a little bit of luck there. There's a little bit of like right place, right time, which is luck. And then we are, I think, pretty good at developing some athletes, and obviously got something here that he wasn't getting before, and that helped him to move forward. Just kind of a natural part of the development process for him, maybe too, is getting stronger and getting better in the water. So just trying to do what's best for where I am at the moment, and like, find a way to recruit that's going to set us apart. I think our team here at GW did that really well, especially during COVID. We used that time really wisely in terms of building the team that we have now, and knowing that doing so takes a lot of time. Like, we have to cast a really wide net. We sprinkle in some great international swimmers here and there. With the kids in the U.S., we got to cast a really wide net to filter down to those who see us as a realistic option and want to come here and keep building on what we have. From there, I think I tend to be pretty organized with how we execute things, throughout a season, and there's intent there with a training plan and a training program and what's going to suit everybody in a way to where they can perform. But I have really good people around me. I mean, the longer I do this, the more I recognize just how important that is. And that's something that's been tricky lately. I hate to go off on tangents, man. I could talk forever, but
No,
especially with this extra year, the COVID year, you can get a fifth year. Like, we're in the middle of DC. So like 22, 23-year-old kids are going to love this place. We could build our whole team on fifth years. The problem is it's hard to build a culture that way. And if you get the wrong fifth years, it can blow everything up. So like we've been careful and fortunate with that. And like we had 2 this year that were amazing. One from Northwestern, one from Duke, sprinkled in with a couple that stayed here from GW for their fifth year. And they were amazing. Lifetime bests, which is great. But beyond that, had an experience that they were really proud of, able to compete and win conference championships. So, fortunate there. And I've become more deliberate with that, like, who are we surrounding our team with from a staffing standpoint? Do we have young, like, go-getting, hungry people that are ready to hit the ground recruiting, ready to invest themselves in the athletes, which is, you wouldn't think a lot to ask, but kind of hard sometimes. Like, I hate to sound like an old guy, but we're used to a lot of communication through screens. So doing so face-to-face, isn't always the most natural thing, even for a young coach now. So we've been really fortunate to find the right people to do all those things. And I think there's a little bit of every component. I've always felt like if I work really hard, I'll have no regret. Like that's what we tell our team. The only way to fail is to not try. And the only way to look back and feel like you've come up short and have regret over it is to not pour into it what you can. And that's what we try to do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It makes me think, like, I had a podcast a conversation through one of the podcasts I recorded with Greg Perini at Denison, and he made a good point where he was like, it's so much easier to be the predator as opposed to being the predated. And it made me think of, a program like you at GW, where you guys, again, 4th consecutive title, 3rd consecutive title for the women, and you're looking to build on that. But like, I'm curious, how do you, from the leadership side as being the head coach of this program, like, kind of motivate your kids, like, year in and year out, to be like, hey, look, yes, we achieved, like, quote unquote, maybe the highest level of, capturing that conference title, but how do you reset for the next year? Like, how do you continue to, again, produce that high level and continue to set Atlantic 10 records and bring more people to NCAAs? Like, what is the message that you're just giving off to these swimmers?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably twofold. First and foremost, like I said, we have a lot of swimmers to whom they're swimming, and on the diving side too, it's really important to them. So when we get to the springtime, I'm having to pull them out. They want to come back. Like, they want to come back right after the A10, maybe wash out a couple of days and then get back at it. It's like, take it easy. I need you to be away, like, for me. And like, secondly, your body needs a break. And then they get right back into basically 20 hours. Like, they're doubling, they're lifting, all, like, it's optional. It's voluntary, but they have a training plan and a training program that they're following throughout the spring. We usually compete as a team in late April, early May, which we'll do again this year. And then we have a whole chunk that stay for the summer. If they don't stay for the summer, they're going home either to national teams overseas or to great programs, domestically, and doing the work that needs to be done to swim at a high level. So that's probably number one. That'll take a little bit of the weight of being a conference champion away, because you're focused on some other things that will make you better. I think the other thing is just hammering home the messaging of complacency and like how once we lose a little bit of that edge, it can come back and bite us. We had it on on t-shirts this year one. Like, we wanted to reset. Remember that we got a whole new crop of first years and some new fifth years that have never been a part of a conference championship, and we want to perform at a high level for them. Remember that we have a conference that is getting better at running us down. They are getting better every single year at running us down. And, maybe it didn't look like with the final score this year, but this conference is far better than it was when I got here 6 years ago. So there's that. And I was having a conversation with Djurdje before, I guess it was during the meet, and, where he said, like, I thought we might lose the meet. And it's like, okay, yeah, it wasn't going to happen. So they're listening. They're listening to that messaging during the year. Do I think they're listening to the messaging? No, No, I don't. I worry that they're not, but it was nice to hear that that some of that was getting through. So that's really it. And maybe reevaluating our goals. And yes, we pay attention to mid-major rankings. We pay attention to national rankings. I know right now that our women are 39th in the country. I know right now that our guys are 41st. I know that we're 5th or I guess 6th in the mid-major ranking, I think for both squads. So like we pay attention to that. Like any motivator can be a good motivator. Like if you were 300th in the country in the 200 backstroke last year, let's go 299 next year. Like you can use whatever. So I'm definitely always trying to use whatever I can to do that.
Definitely. No, I like that though. Year one, it's a good little like mantra to have. Certainly, another mantra for you guys is raise high, right? Like that's kind of the big. You guys have raise high, and then I don't know if it's like an inside sort of message that you guys have, but I would always see the symbols on the swimmer's chest that it was sort of like a triangle with a line straight through the middle. So can you touch on that, or just the mantras and sort of the symbols that your team has going on there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, race high is a university-wide slogan that is used throughout GW. It's part of our fight song. It just kind of references the sort of attitude we'd like to have, thinking bigger, thinking higher, and I do like that. I like it a lot. So you'll hear it. In terms of the symbols, those have become very popular in Division I swimming and diving, and it doesn't hurt that all the fast teams do it, right? So I think my first year here, one of our athletes, Andrew, like talk about how to leave a legacy. Andrew Cho came in and he's like, we need something, right? And he came up with this symbol, and I know I'm not allowed to share it. I know I got a definition of it, and honest to God, I kind of forget. But it's kind of a rallying cry. I will say this: the thing I love most about our triangle is that when we first started it, it was a men's team thing, right? And I brought him in, and it was like, listen, guys, I get it. I pay enough attention to know that, like, yes, they got that going at NC State and like all of that, right? And, drawn on your chest or whatever. And it's great. I love it. And even, we had it going at Western Kentucky when I was there. I get it. If you really want to differentiate yourselves, get the women involved. Get the women involved. And when we talk about like how to be an elite combined program, and again, thinking about motivators, we pay attention to which of those mid-majors are combined programs, not just women only, not just men only. Where are we competing? And we're right at the top. So anyway, they bought into that. And if you go to our meets, you'll see it, male, female, with that on board. And again, it sounds silly, but that is one thing I'm kind of proud of. It's like, I get it. We're kind of copying and pasting from some of those big places, as we should be. They're awesome. But let's make it our own and find a way to have it like be a galvanizing thing for both squads.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I love it. I loved seeing the diamonds on NC State that they have. Obviously, that again, inside team messages, which I think is great, kind of protecting what it means. But like you said, kind of like a rallying cry and something.
We've started getting a couple of the tattoos as well. I know there's some of those out there, so it's evolved. And every time I see Andrew, who's now like killing it up in Boston, in the business world, I tell him like, dude, remember how this all started with the triangle? I mean, it's on all our championship rings and everything, and it's this big mysterious deal. And he was just like sitting in class one day, it was like, we need something, so here it is.
Yeah, that's great though. Yeah, no, I remember like racing against Andrew Cho in the backstroke events, and certainly and yeah, that whole beginning of that symbol I remember very like vividly. So I think that's great.
Not to go off in a tangent again, but you asked about like how we can build a program or like how it was done and all that stuff. Someone like Andrew is really critical in that. When I arrived at GW, their men had already started to elevate, right? And I had like 3 or 4 guys and 3 or 4 women that were upperclassmen, juniors and seniors that immediately bought into what I was doing. I don't even know if they believed in it, but they knew that in order for this to be successful, like we need to share this message with the rest of the team that we're going for it, and we're going for it with whatever Brian's got in store for us. And Andrew like led the charge on that. Emily Zhang led the charge on that. Moritz Fath, Emil's Poena, like Lucy Castro. I had a whole slew that like believed for almost no reason, right? And I think that went a really long way in kickstarting things for us.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, but it's great to touch on that. I was listening to a podcast actually earlier this morning because I'll just geek out on listening to certain swimmer or coaches podcast just for my own knowledge. But it was Abby Whitesell, and she was I think on Missy Franklin and Katie Hoff's podcast, and she was talking about how interesting it was for her to transition into college because she had kind of redshirted her freshman year and just was having a really hard time buying into trusting her coaches. Like she had a set way of, like a lot of these swimmers swimming for a coach at a club level that they've built trust around. And then sometimes like you might see a freshman slump or something happen where that athlete is just not kind of performing to the level that you would have hoped for as a coach, or even they would have hoped for, out of themselves. And she was saying, really, it can be a trust thing, like me not just trusting what my coaches are giving me and what, the training. Cause she was like, in swimming, one thing I learned is just not a one size fits all. Like there are different ways of training that can get you to, the highest level that you can perform at. But, it's kind of like getting around that mental piece of like just trusting your coaches. And so, it just made me think.
And that never ends, right? And it's awesome that she brought that up. Someone at such a high level,
right.
Like you would think that should go to like Cal or whatever and buy right in. And we run into the same thing. I'm in my 6th year here. We've won 9 conference championships. You think they'd buy in, but like, I'm going to have that conversation with 3 or 4 athletes throughout the spring. Like, how do I get you to a point where you can believe in what we're doing? Cause it's critical for you having success, and I'm willing to meet you to get there. So how can we go ahead and do that? And I actually think it has gotten a little harder to get like that full buy-in because they're inundated with information, good or bad, inundated with that at all times. And as I get older, I think the messaging starts to become like, hey, there is a structure to how we do things here, and I'm not quite sure it's going to change enough for you to love it. So like, either we need to find a place that will be able to do that, or we need to work on finding a good common ground and communicate about everything. And I mentioned about Misha's success. We kind of had to do that and get to a point where, we made some adjustments that he could believe in and listened and processed and made the changes we thought we needed to make to try something better. And he improved because of it, I think. So it's tricky, man. It's tricky, but don't give up on it, because I don't think it's ever going to end.
Yeah, no, definitely. It happens across the board, but addressing it, being communicative, I think is key for sure. I had another question that came to mind when it comes to just I think it was back to the recruiting front, like you approaching international athletes and communicating with them, and like, what's the difference there of just kind of the recruiting front when it comes to, nationally within the United States, casting a wide net, kind of filtering down those who would be interested, but then going on the international side, because that was something I just never had experience with in my last 2 years of college, and just kind of going through that. I might have had minimal, but I'm always interested, like going through that international kind of recruiting front and how you get, the swimmers eventually to kind of commit to GW.
Yeah. I think I have a lot of experience with it. When I was at UConn, we had a good chunk of international athletes. When I was at Western Kentucky, we had a good chunk, and it continues on and on. So I think having that experience early and getting over, like, I don't know, the lack of comfort in reaching out. And when I first started, there were still a lot of athletes that just like had zero grasp on the English language. Now, most Europeans, they're taught that at a very young age. So communication has gotten easier and more comfortable that way. Academically, they're usually pretty good. So it's easy to get them into school. The communication piece has really become very similar to what we do in the US. I'll reach out to them with a text on WhatsApp and take it from there, get them on a call. I usually get a little more face-to-face time, I think, with internationals, but our city is unique. DC is basically a collection of neighborhoods. It's a gym. If you're outside of DC, a lot of times all you hear about is politics, but it is a vibrant young city with just a ton to do. And I think a lot of our internationals, it reminds them of Europe. Like it's a walkable city. Everything you need is close by, and they like that piece of it. We've probably dialed it back a little bit as we've gotten better, because in order to secure, what they need to come here financially, you got to be pretty damn good now to come to GW. So like it's dialed back a bit. But it's still, I think it's a super rewarding part of the experience for our athletes, to have friends, roommates, teammates that are all over the world and learn, different things culturally and all of that is really super formative and rewarding. One of the things I love over the summer is when they'll travel to see each other and like, I'll get a picture, from, wherever it is, in Poland or Serbia or Italy or like whatever. And they've met up and they're together, especially our alums, continuing those relationships is really, really cool. Of course, I think we can recruit at a higher level with international athletes because of some of the success we've had with previous internationals. So like it tends to snowball a little bit for sure. I get a ton of interest from international athletes that, 90% of them probably aren't fast enough for us to bring them in and recruit them and all that sort of stuff. So it's come naturally to me just because I've been doing it for like the better part of 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, last few questions here. I just this one came to mind. I asked some other coaches this, but like when you look at your coaching career thus far, in retrospect, obviously there's much more coaching to be done. But like, what are you most proud of as a coach yourself, and being in this position that you're in, like across the board in the different positions that you've been in? I mean, it could be specifics, but I would say just looking back at all the years that you've had, either at GW, St. Bonaventure, Western Kentucky, wherever you've been, like, what can you kind of think about and be like, I'm proud of the way that maybe I've done X as a coach, or
Okay.
I've grown in this way as a coach. And it's kind of loaded, but I thought of that. That's the last one to throw at you.
That's a good one. Because it is good to compartmentalize sometimes, right? And to take my 5 years at Western Kentucky and think like, all right, what are the major 2 or 3 items that I took from that? I think at that point, the thing I'm proudest of is, I was really nervous going into that job. Like any young person, I still wasn't confident that I had what it took to recruit at a high level, to have a group that was mine and train them to the point where, they're seeing the success that they wanted to have. And that snowballed throughout my time. By the time I left, had an NCAA All-American in the breaststrokes and like had great experiences, great success. And when I look back, the relationships that were formed there are just so good. I can't tell you the number of weddings I've been to with former athletes. And that's probably the first and foremost thought. The other thing is I met my wife there, so that was good. And like, a lot of stuff kind of fell into place that way, I guess. Moving on to St. Bonaventure, I actually took that job because my wife is an alum and swam there. So it was a natural fit for my first head coaching position. And again, thinking about building some confidence that I could do this as a head coach and maybe bring some success to a team that hadn't experienced it in a really long time. Their women's program really had been down for 10 to 15 years once I got there, and to elevate it really quickly. The best part of that to me was that the women could walk around campus feeling great about what they were doing as athletes. And that wasn't the case before I got there for the most part. And like I said, winning that 400 medley relay, they hadn't won a relay in like, I don't know how long, 10, 12, 15 years. So it meant a lot to them. It meant a lot to the entire team to be elevated that way. And, beyond that, had my first son in Olean, New York at St. Bonaventure, and just a lot of great experiences. That's when we got married. So like, you think about life, right? How does the whole timeline play out? And then, finally coming here to GW, figuring out how to do this as a parent has been a massive challenge. And as a parent and a spouse who has a wife with an equally challenging and time demanding profession. She is a fundraiser and works at Georgetown University and works in athletics. So she's at games late at night. She's at games, over the weekend. She's at conferences. She travels more than I do. And, being able to juggle all that with my kids, still being the number one priority has been challenging, but really rewarding. What it's meant is like a lot of time for my kids around my team. Like I bring them everywhere. They come to the A10 meet. Boomer jumped in with us at the end of the meet. He's done that like 3 or 4 times now. We bring them absolutely everywhere. They're at practice. They love swimming. On Tuesday, Thursday night, they go with my wife. She coaches 2 nights a week at a local place. So that's probably what I think of first and foremost. I also, like I said, when I got here, the men were already on a really good trajectory, right? And taking over a team like that has its challenges. It's different than taking over a team like I did at Bonaventure that was at the bottom. That was relatively easy. All I had to do was bring in like 2 or 3 really great athletes and get us toward the top of the A10 in one recruiting year, right? And here, that's a little different. And like you mentioned, kind of being the target is different. So just a confidence builder, knowing that like I could do that in a number of different scenarios at different universities, different institutions, city school, rural school, middle of nowhere, nation's capital, like all that stuff is a confidence builder for sure. The biggest takeaway is the relationships. It always is. Like, it's not always at the forefront because we're in the grinder every day. We're trying to give what we can every single day to the team in front of us and make it better and better. But we're always given those reminders of the athletes that move on and are checking back in or coming back for an alumni event or a Hall of Fame induction or whatever it is. The relationship piece is the best part, the absolute best part. Swimming's so funny, man. Like there are so many times throughout the year where you question it, right? It's like, why are we doing this? Why are we putting in this much time and effort? And is the reward worth it and all that sort of stuff? But then you get to this time of year and it doesn't matter whether it's been here at GW or it's way back at UConn or Western or whatever. It's like holing out on the 18th hole, right? It has you coming back for more. It's addictive that way. And that's what's so unique about what we do. And I've had an element of that everywhere I've been. So I guess those have been some of the main takeaways. It's a huge responsibility. I try not to forget that. And I thank our parents every year, just like, thanks for sending me your kid. Because I know that's hard to do. And especially as a parent, to entrust someone not only with their swimming career, which I take as a huge responsibility, but just with a really important formative years in their life. It is a massive responsibility that I take very, very seriously. And I try not to forget that. And it is something I'm proud of.
Yeah. I love it. No, it's a great answer, and certainly compartmentalizing your different times. But just a common thread through it all is just, those relationships and knowing, having that responsibility piece that like, this means a lot to me. I'm very, like, you sound very prideful of just being in the position that you are. And certainly, balancing, like you said, like I would love to get more questions thrown at you just about the balance of it all and whatnot. But, that could be a whole nother conversation, but I'll wrap up here. Are you a fan of Get Out Swims? And if so, do you have any specific Get Out Swim stories that stick in mind?
All right. So I listened to the podcast you did with Jack, and this was before you had contacted me. So I knew this question was coming. And I remember at the time thinking, well, Jack Levitt's a much more fun person than I am. So like, he's going to answer this the right way. And thinking to myself, like, if I'm being truthful, I've probably done fewer Get Out Swims than most coaches throughout my career. I tend to be that guy that, like, if we need a recovery day or a day off, they're getting a day off. Like, I'm telling them, you're off, sleep in. And I'll usually do that, once or twice a year, maybe twice a semester. And a day like today, when I look outside, bright, blue sky, it's warm, it's beautiful in DC, a great city to be out and about. Like, who wants to be inside for the next 4 hours? So maybe some of it's selfish. And like, specifically a Thursday afternoon, which typically are a little bit of a bounce back day, we'll give them a day. Usually once a year, I'll surprise them with a scavenger hunt. We have a pretty sick scavenger hunt here in DC. Some of the stuff you'd probably recognize. Some of it is like little hidden gems here, but it's intense. It's like an hour long. I think last year, one group ended up putting in about 6 miles. They're not allowed to use the electric scooters or Uber or anything like that. It's all on foot, but you can go as far as the Capitol, is like 3 miles away. But anyway, I'll stop beating around the bush. What I've learned with Get Out Swims is to use them selfishly to make a swimmer better. We had an athlete, Ava DeAngelis, who is in a position to make an NCAA meet right now. She went 59.7 in the 100 breast. And one of the major obstacles for her was finding the right emotional balance when she gets up in races, and trying to find the fight that she has in a workout and apply that when she races. So we used some Get Out Swim opportunities to do that and basically put the weight of the team on her shoulders and say, like, hey, like, if you go 103, push 100 breaststroke right here, we're done. Or, we'll take a round off on the end of the set, or like whatever it might be. So I'll try to use that as a way to simulate basically and go from there. But I'd be lying if I told you I do it a lot. Maybe I'll try to, you've inspired me. I'll try to do it a little bit more often and have some fun with it. It can obviously be a big morale booster. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I guess traditionally I tend to like stick to the plan a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I mean, it's you sprinkle it in, here and there. And I think that's when it works. Is like, on a rare occasion, again, confidence booster for someone who maybe is just struggling mentally behind the blocks and needs a confidence boost. Like, you can do this. I think it's nice for sure.
Can I flip that question on you
Yeah.
and ask, can you give me and you may have done this in a previous podcast, so I apologize, but
Sure.
The best or most memorable get out experience that you had with Russ Yarworth? Because there must be a good story behind that.
With Russ. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to think back. Like, we had definitely some get out swims that we might have done over intersession. I think there was one time where it might have been less of us in the water. It was during actually the break period where we were kind of shut down for finals, and I think it might have been the last couple of days. Maybe some swimmers were kind of in their finals. I just remember the practice being, at least in that time slot, a little bit more dead. And I think it was just kind of low energy. And so I think I remember it because it was myself doing like 100 back get out swim at the end of the practice. And I think I had been lacking a little bit of my confidence because it was a freshman year. And I just popped off like a personal best. So it was like a 5,100 backstroke time. And it was something where, I needed it because it was like a confidence booster going into the break before we would come back for training trip. But yeah, I mean, I think like some of the better, it may not necessarily a get out swim, but we would always do it was called, I think, the Three Kings Challenge. It was a tradition that Russ would always have us do at training trip. And basically it would be on one of our last practice sessions. We'd flip a coin. And basically, we would center the flipping of the coin, basically a luck around either doing a 50 off the blocks for time or a 200 off the blocks for time. And we do 6 rounds of it. So we'd all gather up into 6 squads. And it was just like the most electric, fun atmosphere because it was completely up to you guys on the luck of the draw with this flip of the coin. You could either be doing 6 200s off the block for time in a long course pool, or you could be doing 6 50s, or obviously sprinkled in a little bit of both. And so I just remember that always being super, super fun with Russ and just, building some sort of tradition around it. It makes me think like, get out swim or not, if you have those moments where you can build in some sort of game, a tradition around like getting up on the blocks and swimming fast and having that element where it's like, oh, I don't know what it's going to be. I think those really were fun because those were like memories that you don't forget as a swimmer. So I appreciate the question. Yeah.
Yeah. I could see Russ being like an expert at that sort of thing. And I love that approach where you're still kind of getting something out of it. We'll do that pretty frequently where, I'll only really need to get maybe 4 rounds out of them, but we'll write up 6 and then have a couple get out swims to get out of it. And like, I'll lean into an assistant and be like, I only wanted 4 anyway, so we're good. Let's get him out of here.
Right.
But yeah. It's one neat thing about the A10 is guys like Russ, Bob Newcomb. Like I miss seeing them at the A10 meet so much. And like we have a little bit of a connection to UMass. My wife was a grad assistant there, like 2010, right around there. Every time I'd see Russ, it'd give me a big hug. I felt like it was my dad, and like same thing with Bob. Bob checks in at least twice, maybe 3 times a year with me and just great people. I think that's part of what like kept me here. Like I really love what we do within the Atlantic 10. It's consistent, great people. And the same goes for Clarkie. I mean, it's just like really good people within these teams. And I think that's why the conference is getting better, like really good coaching, good people. And even with some turnover we've had, we continue to have that. So yeah, man, I do miss seeing Russ on the pool deck though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Russ, absolute. Just absolutely great. Yeah. Great person and a character in that. And I think, like you said, he treated his swimmers like they were his kids of his own. And he didn't have kids of his own. So like, swimmers were always sort of like his family. So, he definitely had that presence, but yeah. And I just heard UMass might be moving away from the Atlantic 10. They're going to join the MAC soon. So we will have one less team as far as that. I don't know if the A10 has plans to have any additions, but that's kind of a bummer. I mean, I don't know how Coach Clarkie feels about that, but I like the A10. So
Yeah, I know I don't love it. The more we have, the better, right? And
Right,
keeping a
right.
good, strong, robust conference. And UMass has been in it for so long. I grew up in Massachusetts, so like I know all about it. And
Mm.
yeah, it sounds that way. The good thing is it's a great conference. It's a good swimming conference, the
Oh, yeah.
MAC. So that's a positive. But a little fun fact: a few years back, you may have been at this shindig, but I went to a UMass actually twice. I went to a UMass alumni event, one in Amherst and one on the Cape. UMass swimming, and Russ had
Okay.
invited me. I think once I had just taken the job at St. Bonaventure, so like I didn't wear any Bonas gear. Nobody knew who the hell I was anyway, but I had a blast, an absolute blast. And then another time when I was working at Western, I flew back and did one of the alumni weekends because my wife Danielle was involved and all that stuff. And it was I had a ton of fun.
Oh,
So
yeah.
big group you
Yeah.
guys got.
Great representation, yeah, from the alumni for sure. Well, good. Well, Brian, anything else you'd like to add? Now's the time. But other than that, it's been fun, talking to you. It's been great learning more about yourself and your coaching journey, but also the program that you have here at GW. So, yeah.
Yeah, likewise, man. I appreciate you putting this together and have enjoyed listening to the episodes, previous. I love that Celtics banner you got in the background. Hoping for big things in June this year. We'll see if we can close the deal. But yeah, Thanks again for having me, Seamus. Appreciate it, man.
Definitely, Brian. All right, well, be well, and thanks again.